He walked into the room and froze. His 5-year-old son stood quietly, facing the wall, not moving, not speaking. At first, he thought it was just a game, but when Grandma discovered the reason, she burst into tears. What could make a little boy do this? And a grandmother cry so deeply? Stay with me till the end to find out. But before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Daniel Reed had always imagined that home would feel warmer once he started working fewer hours, but that evening, as he stepped inside, something about the silence felt wrong. The clock in the hallway ticked softly, echoing against the wooden walls. A faint smell of soup lingered from the kitchen, but no laughter, no chatter, just stillness. He set his briefcase down and called out, "Ethan!" No answer. He tried again, his voice quieter this time, as if afraid of disturbing something delicate. "Buddy, where are you?" From the living room came the faint sound of breathing. Daniel turned the corner and froze. His 5-year-old son stood facing the wall, barefoot, hands at his sides, motionless. The boy's small shoulders trembled ever so slightly, but he didn't turn around. "Ethan," Daniel whispered, stepping closer. "Hey, what are you doing, champ?" The boy's voice was tiny. "I'm being good," Daniel frowned. "By facing the wall?" No answer. Ethan's head tilted lower, his chin nearly touching his chest. Daniel crouched beside him, gently touching his shoulder. The child flinched, almost like a reflex of fear. Hey, "It's just me," Daniel said softly. "You can turn around," but Ethan shook his head. "No, Daddy, I can't. I'm being punished." Those words hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. Punished for what? He looked around the room, toys neatly stacked, no mess, nothing broken. The housekeeper wasn't around. Only his mother, Margaret, had been staying with them for the week, and she was upstairs resting. And then there was Laura, the new nanny he'd hired 2 months ago. Calm, responsible, a woman who spoke in measured tones and seemed to have an answer for everything. "Who told you you're punished?" Daniel asked carefully. Ethan's lips quivered. He didn't answer, only whispered, "I have to face the wall till I'm good again." Daniel's chest tightened. "Good again? Ethan, you're already good. What's this about?" But the child's silence was heavier than any explanation. Moments later, Laura appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands with a kitchen towel. "Oh, Mr. Reed, you're home early," she said, her usual composure intact. Daniel looked up sharply. "Why is my son standing like this?" She glanced at Ethan, expression unreadable. He was being a little stubborn earlier, didn't want to eat his lunch. "I just told him to take a moment to calm down." Daniel's jaw tensed. "A moment? He looks terrified." Laura raised her palm slightly. "I didn't mean anything harsh, sir. Kids respond differently sometimes." "I'll talk to him." Daniel turned back to Ethan, gently lifting the boy into his arms despite his resistance. The child's small hands clutched at his father's shirt, his breathing fast and uneven. Daniel could feel his heart racing. "You're safe, okay? You're not in trouble," he murmured. He carried Ethan upstairs to his room, where the walls were covered in crayon drawings, suns, houses, smiling faces. But one drawing, taped right above the desk, caught his eye. A dark circle, a boy with his face turned away, and behind him a faint outline of what looked like a woman's shadow. "Did you draw this?" Daniel asked softly. Ethan nodded, still avoiding his gaze. "It's me." "And that's Mommy." Daniel's throat tightened. "Mommy?" he echoed. His wife, Emily, had died 3 years ago in a car accident, the same night he promised himself to never cry in front of Ethan, believing strength meant silence. "She told me to be good," Ethan said suddenly, eyes wide and sincere. "If I'm good, she'll come back." Daniel froze. "Who told you that, Ethan?" The boy hesitated. "I heard it. In my dream, and sometimes when I'm bad, I feel like she can't see me anymore. So I face the wall, so she'll know I'm sorry." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He sat there speechless, trying to steady the tremor in his hands. He didn't know whether to feel heartbreak or guilt. For years he'd buried his grief under work, thinking he was protecting Ethan from sadness. But all this time, the child had been carrying his own version of pain, building his own way to bring his mother back. That night, Daniel tucked Ethan into bed. When the boy drifted into sleep, Daniel quietly checked his bedside drawer and found a small notebook. It was filled with scribbles, stick figures, and words written in uneven handwriting. "Dear Mom, I was good today. I didn't talk loud. I faced the wall like you said. Please come back soon." Daniel's eyes blurred. He turned page after page, every one of them filled with the same desperate innocence, apologies, promises, hope. "I'll be good forever if you come back." He sat there in the dim glow of the night lamp, his face buried in his hands, a father who had no idea how much his son had misunderstood the silence he'd created in their home. When Margaret came to check on them, she found Daniel still awake, holding the little notebook. Her eyes softened. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly. Daniel shook his head, his voice hoarse. "Mom, he thinks if he's good enough, Emily will come back." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh dear," she whispered. "He's just a baby. He doesn't understand what loss means." Daniel nodded slowly. "I think I made it worse. I never talked about her. I thought if we pretended to move on, he'd heal faster." Margaret sat beside him. "Children don't forget, Daniel. They fill silence with imagination, and sometimes imagination hurts more than truth." Downstairs, the rain began to fall, soft and steady. The house creaked with its usual quietness. But this time the silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Later, when Daniel checked on Ethan again, he found him whispering in his sleep, "I'm sorry, Mummy, I'll face the wall again tomorrow." Margaret stood behind him, tears slipping down her cheeks. The sight of her grandson trapped in invisible guilt was too much to bear. She placed a trembling hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we'll find out where he learned this. And we'll fix it," Daniel nodded wordlessly. But deep down, he felt something break. Not just guilt, but realization. Maybe the wall his son faced wasn't in the living room. Maybe it was the same wall Daniel had built around his own heart. Outside, thunder rumbled across the sky. Ethan stirred in his bed, clutching a small drawing of a woman with wings, his mother, Emily, smiling from the clouds. In the dim light, Margaret could see the title written on the top of the page, in the shaky letters of a child still learning to spell, "Mum in the Sky." She pressed the page against her chest, her tears wetting the edges. For the first time in years, she prayed not for strength, but for healing, for both the father who forgot to grieve and the boy who learned to punish himself for missing love. That night, as Daniel sat by his son's bedside listening to the rain, he realized something he should have understood long ago. Sometimes the hardest thing a parent can do is face the silence they helped create. And sometimes all a child needs is for someone to say the words they've been waiting for all along. "You're already good. You're already loved." The clock ticked on, the rain softened, and somewhere in that quiet house, a father made a silent promise to never let his son face the wall again. The morning sun slipped through the curtains, painting faint stripes of gold across the floor. For the first time in weeks, Daniel didn't rush out the door. He sat at the kitchen table, a mug of untouched coffee before him, lost in thought. Upstairs, his mother Margaret was helping Ethan get dressed for school. Every sound felt heavy, the creak of the stairs, the shuffle of small feet, the quiet rustle of clothes. It wasn't just a home anymore. It was a place full of ghosts no one had dared to name. When Ethan came down, his eyes were sleepy, his small hands gripping a crumpled drawing. Daniel smiled faintly, trying to sound cheerful. "Good morning, champ. Did you sleep okay?" Ethan nodded, sliding into his chair. "Yes, Daddy." But something in the boy's tone didn't match the words. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that came from play, but from thought. A kind of tired only sorrow could bring. Margaret placed a plate of pancakes in front of him. "Eat up, sweetheart," she said warmly. Ethan looked at the food, hesitated, and then started cutting it carefully, piece by piece, as though he were performing a ritual. Daniel noticed it, the way his son whispered softly before each bite. "For Mummy." He and Margaret exchanged a glance. She placed a gentle hand over his and said quietly, "I'll stay with him today." "You should rest." Daniel hesitated but agreed. He knew his mother's instincts were sharper than his own these days. And maybe she could see what he couldn't. After Daniel left for his study, Margaret watched Ethan playing quietly with his toys. Something about the way he arranged them, always in perfect lines, always facing the same direction, tugged at her heart. "Ethan, honey," she said softly. "Why do they all have to face that way?" He looked up, puzzled. "So they don't see bad things?" "Mommy doesn't like bad things." Margaret froze. "What bad things?" He shrugged, turning back to his toys. "When people shout or cry, that's when she goes away." The old woman's heart tightened. She sat beside him, trying not to let her voice tremble. "Who told you that, my love?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't remember. Maybe I heard it." He paused, frowning as though searching for the memory. "Maybe it was Laura," Margaret blinked. "Laura?" The boy nodded. "She said Mommy only comes close when I'm quiet and good. That I shouldn't make Daddy sad, or Mommy will stay in the sky." Margaret felt her throat tighten. The words were innocent enough, but to a 5-year-old's heart they were poison. She stood abruptly, her chest aching with anger and sorrow. Without another word, she excused herself and went straight to Daniel's study. He looked up from his desk, startled by her expression.
"Mom, what happened?"
Margaret closed the door behind her. "It's Laura. She didn't mean harm, but she's filled Ethan's head with guilt. He believes his mother is punishing him from heaven whenever he misbehaves." Daniel's face drained of color. "What?" She told him that Emily is watching, that being quiet keeps her close. Her voice broke. "Daniel, he's terrified to be a child." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "That's not discipline," he muttered. "That's emotional damage." Margaret nodded, tears in her eyes. "You have to talk to her. But first you need to talk to him. He needs to hear the truth from you." Daniel leaned back, rubbing his face. "I don't even know how to start, Mum. I barely understand how to talk about her myself." "Then start with love," she said softly. "Children don't need perfect words. They just need truth that feels safe." After she left, Daniel sat in silence for a long time, listening to the rain tapping faintly against the window. He thought of Emily, her laugh, her warmth, her way of finding light in everything, and how quickly he'd buried all of it, thinking it would protect their son. But in hiding the pain, he had hidden her too. Later that afternoon, while Ethan napped, Margaret began tidying his room. As she pulled open the small desk drawer, a folded envelope slipped out. Curious, she opened it and froze. Inside were pages covered in childish handwriting, letters addressed to Mom in the sky. Each one carried a piece of heartbreak too heavy for a child to bear. "Dear Mommy, I faced the wall today, so God knows I'm sorry. Maybe you'll come home now. Dear Mommy, I tried not to cry because Laura said you don't like noise. I miss you every day. Dear Mommy, Daddy doesn't talk about you, but I think he misses you too. I'll make him smile, then maybe you'll come back." Margaret pressed a trembling hand to her lips. Each word pierced through her. She sat down on the edge of the bed, unable to stop the tears. When Daniel walked in a few minutes later, she silently handed him the letters. He read them one by one, and by the third page his vision blurred. "Oh, God," he whispered, voice cracking. "He's been apologizing for missing his mother." Margaret nodded, eyes glistening. "He's been punished by love he can't understand." That evening when Laura returned from the market, Daniel asked to speak with her. The tension in the air was thick. She looked surprised, then anxious as she saw the papers in his hand. "Laura," he said quietly, "did you tell my son his mother only watches him when he's quiet?" She looked down, fidgeting with her fingers. "I might have said something like that, but I didn't mean—" He interrupted sharply. "He thinks his mother's spirit is punishing him." Her eyes widened. "Oh my God, no. I only wanted to comfort him." He asked why she doesn't come back. "I told him maybe she can see him from heaven if he behaves. I thought it would make him feel better." Margaret's voice trembled. "You made him believe his sadness is a mistake." Laura began to cry softly. "I'm so sorry. I didn't understand." Daniel's anger faded into exhaustion. He knew she hadn't meant harm, but damage had been done. "Please," he said quietly, "don't speak to him about heaven or his mother again. I'll handle it." Laura nodded tearfully and left the room. The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. That night, Daniel sat beside Ethan's bed, watching him sleep. The child's small hand clutched the corner of a photograph, Emily, smiling with her hair in the wind. Daniel remembered that day vividly. A picnic by the lake, laughter echoing through the trees, Ethan only 2 years old, chasing butterflies while Emily looked on with a love that seemed infinite. He whispered into the darkness, "Emily, I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting him, but I only made him lonely." Outside, the wind stirred the curtains, and for a brief moment he imagined he could smell her perfume, lilac and rain. It wasn't real, he knew, but it gave him the courage to do what he should have done long ago. The next morning, Daniel took Ethan out for breakfast at a small cafe near the sea. The boy seemed surprised. They hadn't gone out together in months. Daniel ordered hot chocolate and pancakes, the same things Emily used to make on Sundays. When the food came, Daniel leaned forward and said gently, "Ethan, do you remember Mommy's favorite place?" Ethan's eyes brightened a little. "The lake?" "Yes," Daniel said softly. "She used to say the sky looked closest to the water there." "Do you know what she told me before you were born?" Ethan shook his head. "She said, if I ever can't be with him, tell him to look for me in the light, not in the dark." Daniel smiled faintly. "That means you don't have to face the wall for her to see you. You just have to smile. That's when she's closest." Ethan blinked up at him as if trying to understand. "But Laura said," Daniel interrupted gently. "Laura was trying to help, but she was wrong. Mommy isn't watching to see if you're quiet. She's watching to see if you're happy." The boy looked down at his cup of chocolate, his reflection trembling in the surface. "So, she's not mad at me?" Daniel's throat tightened. "No, son, never. She loved you more than anything, and she'd never want you to feel punished for missing her." For the first time, Ethan's lips curved into a small smile. "Can we go to the lake again?" Daniel nodded. "We'll go today." That evening, Margaret watched them from the porch as father and son walked hand in hand toward the fading sunset, their figures bathed in gold. She felt tears rise again, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from hope. She glanced back at the stack of letters resting on the table, tied now with a blue ribbon. The last page had a new line Ethan had written that morning before leaving the house. "Dear Mommy, I'm going to the lake with Daddy today. I'll look at the sky, not the wall. Maybe that's where you are." Margaret pressed her hand to her heart. The storm inside their home was beginning to calm. The walls that once silenced them were slowly crumbling, replaced by something softer, understanding. As the sun dipped beyond the hills, painting the clouds in hues of pink and orange, a gentle wind swept through the open window, lifting the pages slightly as if an unseen hand had turned them toward the light. The following morning carried a gentleness that the Reed house hadn't felt in a long time. The air smelled of cinnamon and sunlight. For once, Daniel didn't wake to silence. He woke to the sound of laughter, faint and shy, coming from the kitchen. When he went down, he found Ethan and Margaret baking cookies. Flour dusted the boy's nose like snow, and his tiny hands worked clumsily with the dough. Margaret caught Daniel's eye and smiled, her face lined but peaceful. "Looks like we have a new chef in the family," she said. Daniel chuckled, leaning against the doorframe. "I'll take cookies over quiet walls any day." Ethan grinned up at him, a small but real smile. It was the first one Daniel had seen in months. For a moment, the heaviness in his chest eased. Maybe, just maybe, the healing had begun. After breakfast, Daniel told Ethan to grab his jacket. "We're going on an adventure," he said with a wink. Ethan's eyes widened. "Where?" Daniel smiled. "You'll see." The drive took them to the edge of town, to the lake Emily had loved. The air shimmered with morning light, and ripples danced across the water's surface like silver threads. Ethan's small face pressed against the car window, wonder filling his eyes. When they stepped out, Daniel took a deep breath. He hadn't been here since Emily's funeral. The scent of pine, the whisper of wind, the faint echo of her laughter from long ago, it all came rushing back. He swallowed hard and forced himself to smile. Ethan tugged his hand. "Daddy, is this where Mommy liked to come?" "Yes," Daniel said softly. She said this was the one place that always made her feel close to heaven. Ethan tilted his head. So, is she here now? Daniel knelt down so they were eye level. Maybe not here where we can see her, but she's everywhere love stays. You feel that wind? He gestured as the breeze brushed their faces. She's in that. You see that light dancing on the water? That's her smile. Ethan looked out over the lake, his small brow furrowed in thought. Then I don't have to face the wall anymore? Daniel shook his head, his throat tightening. No, son. You never did. They spent the afternoon by the water. Daniel helped him build a tiny wooden boat from driftwood and leaves. They named it Hope, and when Ethan placed it in the water, he whispered, "Sail to Mommy, okay?" The boat floated gently away, its reflection glimmering beneath the sun. Watching his son's innocent act of farewell, Daniel felt something inside him crack open. Not from pain this time, but release. For so long, he had carried guilt for surviving, for not being enough, for not protecting Emily. But now, seeing Ethan's small face filled with peace, he realized that healing didn't come from forgetting. It came from remembering without fear. Later that evening, after they returned home, Margaret found Daniel sitting on the porch steps, looking at the sunset. She brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him. "He's changing," she said softly. "You both are," Daniel nodded. "I think I forgot how to be a father after Emily died. I thought I had to be strong, that showing sadness would make things worse." Margaret smiled gently. "Real strength isn't about hiding pain. It's about showing love even when it hurts." Daniel's gaze drifted toward the horizon. He thought facing the wall would bring her back, and I built my own wall by pretending I was fine. Margaret reached over, resting a hand on his. "Now you're both learning to turn around." That night, after Ethan went to bed, Daniel began to clean out his old study. There were boxes of files, sketches from his architecture firm, and an old photo album he hadn't opened since the accident. As he flipped through its pages, he found a picture of Emily holding baby Ethan, her smile radiant, her eyes alive with light. On the back, she had written, "If one day I'm gone, build him a world full of windows, not walls." Daniel's breath caught. Windows, not walls. The phrase echoed in his mind. Maybe that's what they needed, a way to let the light back in. The next morning, Daniel woke Ethan early. "Get dressed, buddy. We have a project." "What kind of project?" Ethan asked sleepily. "The kind that lets sunshine inside," Daniel said with a wink. They went to the old shed behind the house, gathering wood, glass panels, and paint. Daniel set up a small work table in the backyard. Together, they started building what Daniel called the memory wall. Not a wall to face in guilt, but one filled with drawings, notes, and pictures celebrating love. Ethan painted the first piece, a bright yellow sun with wings. "That's Mommy," he said proudly. "Because she's light and she can fly," Daniel smiled, helping him trace the outlines. "Perfect." Over the next few days, the wall began to take shape. Each glass panel caught the sunlight differently, blues, yellows, soft pinks. Margaret added little quotes Emily used to say. Laura, who had asked for forgiveness, helped plant flowers beneath it. The once heavy atmosphere of the house slowly lifted, replaced by laughter and color. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel saw Ethan standing before the wall, his small hands pressed against the glass. For a second, Daniel's chest clenched. The pose reminded him too much of those dark nights facing the living room wall. But then Ethan turned around, smiling. "Look, Daddy. The light goes through my hand." Daniel's breath shuddered out. "Yeah, son. That's what light does. It goes through everything, even us." Ethan laughed softly, looking up at him. "Then maybe Mommy's light went through me too." Daniel crouched down, his eyes glistening. "I think it always has." That night, as they all sat in the backyard watching the stars come out, Ethan pointed to the brightest one. "Do you think that's her?" Margaret smiled gently. "Maybe it is. Maybe she's been shining this whole time, just waiting for us to look up." Ethan's eyes sparkled. "Then I'll look up every night," and from that moment he did. The nightmares faded. The quiet guilt dissolved into gentle memories. Daniel found himself humming again when he cooked breakfast. He even started sketching new designs for his architecture firm, bright, airy homes filled with open spaces and wide windows. Every one of them carried a piece of Emily's wish. A week later, Margaret found Ethan writing another letter. Her heart skipped a beat, but this one was different. When he finished, he handed it to her shyly. "Can you read it, Grandma?" She unfolded the page. In his uneven handwriting, it said, "Dear Mommy, I don't face the wall anymore. Daddy says you're in the light, so I look for you there. I think you're happy now." "I am too." Margaret couldn't hold back the tears. She hugged him close, whispering, "She would be so proud of you." That evening, Daniel found the letter pinned to the new glass wall. The sunset hit it just right, making the ink glow like fire. He stood there for a long time, feeling the warmth of the light on his face, the scent of rain in the air, the faint sound of Ethan's laughter behind him. And for the first time since losing Emily, Daniel didn't feel broken. He felt whole. Inside, the house hummed with life again. No longer a shrine of silence, it was a place of renewal. Margaret watched her son and grandson, her heart swelling with gratitude. Pain had not vanished. It had simply changed shape, becoming something softer, something alive. As Daniel tucked Ethan into bed that night, the boy whispered, "Daddy, can we build more windows tomorrow?" Daniel smiled. "As many as you want, son. As many as it takes to fill this house with light." Ethan nodded sleepily, his voice fading. "Then maybe the world will never have any walls left." Daniel brushed a hand through his hair, his heart full. "That's the dream, kiddo." He stood at the door for a moment, watching his son drift into peaceful sleep. The moonlight poured across the room, glinting off the glass panel outside. And somewhere deep in his chest, Daniel felt Emily's presence, not as a shadow haunting him, but as warmth guiding him. In the quiet that followed, he whispered into the darkness, "You were right, Em. Windows, not walls." The words hung there, tender and true, as the night wrapped around them. And in that stillness, a family that had been lost in grief finally found its way back to love. The days that followed were the kind that leave quiet imprints on the heart, the kind that don't feel like miracles until you look back. The Reed home, once cloaked in sorrow, now breathed again. Laughter lingered in the hallways, sunlight spilled across the floors, and every morning began with the smell of pancakes and the sound of Ethan's feet running to greet the day. But even in peace, echoes of the past sometimes returned. One rainy evening, Daniel found Ethan sitting by the window, staring outside as droplets chased each other down the glass. "Daddy," the boy asked softly, "do you think Mommy can see us when we're happy too?" Daniel smiled, setting aside his book. "I think that's when she smiles the brightest." Ethan's small face lit up. "Then we should stay happy all the time," Daniel chuckled. "We'll try our best." Yet deep inside, Daniel still carried a quiet fear, the fear of losing what they had rebuilt. Healing, he had learned, wasn't a straight road. Some nights, when the world grew still, he would lie awake remembering Emily's voice, her laughter, her words about living through love, not loss. And then he would rise, walk through the house, and look at the memory wall. The glass panels shimmered even in the dark, holding light from the moon like captured hope. It became their ritual. Every Sunday morning, the three of them, Daniel, Ethan, and Grandma Margaret, would add something new to the wall. Sometimes it was a drawing, sometimes a pressed flower, and once Ethan placed a small seashell he had found by the lake. "This is from the place where Mommy smiled," he said. Months passed, and with each passing day, Daniel noticed the transformation in his son. The boy who once stood facing the wall now ran freely through the garden, his laughter echoing under the open sky. He spoke to people again, he painted, he dreamed. He was still gentle, still thoughtful, but now his eyes carried light instead of loneliness. One morning, Margaret came into Daniel's study holding an envelope. "This came in the mail," she said, her voice touched with surprise. "It's from the community center." Daniel opened it. Inside was an invitation. They were organizing a local art exhibit for children who had gone through difficult times. They had heard about Ethan's drawings through a teacher at his school. The letter invited him to participate, showcasing the theme, Healing Through Hope. Ethan's eyes widened when Daniel told him, "Me? They want my drawings?" Daniel smiled. "They sure do, buddy. The world needs to see what you see. For days, the house buzzed with preparation. Ethan picked his favorite paintings, all bright, full of light and windows and sky. On one canvas, he had painted their memory wall with golden beams pouring through it. He called it The House That Learned to Breathe. When the day of the exhibit arrived, Daniel felt his heart thudding like it had on the day of Ethan's birth. The small community hall was filled with families, children, and teachers. The walls were lined with colors, stories, and silent emotions turned into art. When Ethan's turn came to speak about his painting, he stood on the little stage, hands trembling but smile steady. "This wall," he said softly, pointing to his painting, "used to be just a wall. I thought if I faced the wall, Mommy would come back. But Grandma said Mommy's in the light. So we made the wall out of glass, so the light could come through." There was a hush in the crowd. Ethan took a deep breath, then added, "Now, when I look at it, I don't feel sad anymore. I feel warm, because I know Mommy's not gone. She's in every light that touches us." Applause filled the room. Margaret wiped her tears, and Daniel's chest swelled with pride. It wasn't just applause for a boy's art. It was applause for courage, for healing, for the choice to face the light again. After the event, a woman approached Daniel. She introduced herself as the head of a foundation that supported children coping with loss. "Your son's story," she said gently, "could help so many others. We'd love to feature his painting, with your permission, of course, in our annual campaign." Daniel looked down at Ethan, who nodded shyly. "If it can make someone smile again," the boy whispered, "then yes." That evening, as they drove home, the golden hour painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. Ethan leaned against the window, watching the light fade behind the hills. "Daddy," he murmured, "Mommy must love this time of day. It's when everything looks like her hugs." Daniel laughed softly. "I think you're right." When they reached home, the first thing Ethan did was run to the backyard. The wind had picked up, rustling the flowers near the memory wall. Daniel followed, and they both stood there, watching how the sunlight from the fading day hit the glass. The whole wall seemed to glow, not with sadness, but with peace. Margaret joined them, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. "It's funny," she said, smiling faintly. "The same house that once broke our hearts is now filled with life again." Daniel nodded. "Because we stopped living in shadows." Ethan turned toward him. "Daddy, can we make one more thing on the wall?" "Of course." "What do you want to add?" Ethan thought for a moment, then said, "A window that opens." Daniel raised a brow. "A real one?" Ethan grinned. "Yes. So when the light comes, it can go everywhere." And they did. The next day, Daniel helped him install a small, real window at the center of the memory wall. When the sunlight passed through it, it fell directly into the house, filling the living room with golden warmth. Every morning after that, the first rays of dawn poured through that window, landing right on the family photo of Emily. Smiling bright and beautiful, years passed. Ethan grew taller, stronger, braver. The house changed too, new coats of paint, more flowers, more light. But the wall remained, standing as a symbol of what love could rebuild. Sometimes visitors would come, neighbors, friends, even strangers who had heard their story. They would look at the glass wall and the little open window and always ask the same question, "What does it mean?" Ethan would smile and answer, "It means love doesn't end. It just finds new ways to shine." One summer evening, when the air was calm and fireflies danced in the yard, Daniel sat with Margaret on the porch, watching Ethan play under the stars. "You know," Margaret said quietly, "I used to think grief was something we healed from, but now I think it's something we healed through." Daniel nodded, his gaze following his son. "And sometimes we come out brighter on the other side," Margaret smiled. "You both did." As the night deepened, Daniel felt a gentle breeze sweep through the open window, brushing against his cheek like a whisper. He looked toward the memory wall. The moonlight glimmered across it, and for a fleeting moment he thought he saw a reflection of Emily's face in the glass. Not a ghost, not a dream, just love, pure, endless, and eternal. He closed his eyes letting the peace wash over him. In that quiet house that once knew heartbreak, there was no more darkness, only windows, only light, and somewhere beyond the stars, Emily smiled, watching her family finally live again.